All right, here we go. Bridge to Terabithia, Chapter 1. Chapter 1, Jesse Oliver Aarons Jr. Baroom, 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 barippity, barippity, barippity. Good. His dad had the pickup going. He could get up now. Jess slid out of bed and into his overalls. He didn't worry about a shirt because once he began running, he'd be as hot as poppin' grease, even if the morning air was chill. Or shoes, because the bottom of his feet were by now as tough as his worn out sneakers. Where you going, Jess? Maybelle lifted herself up sleepily from the double bed where she and Joyce Ann slept. Shh, he warned. The walls were very thin. Mama would be mad as flies in a fruit jar if they woke her up this time of day. He patted Maybelle's hair and yanked the twisted sheet up to her small chin. Just over the cow field, he whispered. Maybelle smiled and snuggled down under the sheet. Gonna run? Maybe. Of course he was gonna run. He had gotten up early all day every summer to run. He figured if he worked at it, and Lord had he worked, that he would be the fastest runner in the 5th grade when school opened up. He had to be the fastest, not one of the fastest or next to the fastest, but the fastest, the very best. He tiptoed out of the house. This place was so ratty that it screeched whenever you put your foot down. But Jess found that if you tiptoed, it gave only a low moan, and he could usually get outdoors without waking Mama or Ellie or Brenda or Joyce Ann. Maybelle was another matter. She was going on 7, and she worshipped him, which was okay sometimes. When you were the only boy smashed between 4 sisters, and the older two had despised you ever since you stopped letting them dress up and wheel around in their rusty old doll carriage, and the littlest one, if you looked at her cross-eyed, it was nice enough to have someone who worshipped you, even if it got unhandy sometimes. He started to trot across the yard. His breath was coming out in little puffs, cold for August, but it was early yet. By noontime, when his mom would have him out working, it'd be hot enough. Miss Bessie stared at him sleepily as he climbed across the scrap heap, over the fence and into the cow field. Moo, she said, looking for all the world like another Maybelle with her big, brown, droopy eyes. Hey, Miss Bessie, Jess said soothingly, just go on back to sleep. Miss Bessie strolled over to a greenish patch. Most of the field was brown and dry, and yanked up a mouthful. That a girl, just eat your breakfast. Don't pay me no mind. He always started at the northwest corner of the field, crouched over like the runners he'd seen on the wide world of sports. Bang, he said, and he took off flying through the cow field. Miss Bessie strolled around towards the center, still following him with her droopy eyes, chewing very slowly. She didn't look very smart, even for a cow, but she was plenty bright enough to get out of Jess's way. His straw-colored hair flapped hard against his forehead, and his arms and legs flew out every which way. He'd never learned to run properly, but he was long-legged for a 10-year-old, and no one had more grit than he. Lark Creek Elementary was short on everything, especially athletic equipment, so all the balls went to the upper grades at recess time after lunch. Even if a 5th grader started out the period with a ball, it was sure to be in the hands of a 6th or 7th grader before the hour was half over. The older boys always took the dry center of the upper field for their ball games, while the girls claimed the small top section for hopscotch and jump rope and hanging around talking. So the lower grade boys started this running thing. They would all line up on the far side of the lower field, where it was either muddy or deep, crusty ruts. Earl Watson was no good at this running thing, but he had a really big mouth. He would yell bang, and they'd race to a line they towed on the other side of the field. One time last year, Jesse had won. Not just the first heat, but the whole shebang. Only once. But it had put into his mouth a taste for winning. Ever since he'd been in 1st grade, he'd been that crazy little kid who draws all the time. But one day, on April the 22nd, a drizzly Monday, he ran ahead of them all, the red mud slooshing up through the holes at the bottom of his sneakers. For the rest of that day, and until lunch in the next, he had been the fastest kid in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades, and he was only a 4th grader. On Tuesday, Wayne Pettis had won again as usual, but this year Wayne Pettis would be in 6th grade. He'd play football until Christmas and baseball until June with the rest of the big guys. Anybody had a chance to be the fastest runner, and by Miss Bessie, this year it was going to be Jesse Oliver Aarons Jr. Jess pumped his arms harder and bent his head for the distant fence. He could hear the third-grade boys screaming him on. They would follow him around like a country music star, and Maybelle would pop her buttons. Her brother was the fastest, the best. That ought to give the rest of the first grade something to chew their cuds on. Even his dad would be proud. Jess rounded the corner. He couldn't keep going quite so fast, but he continued running for a while. It'd build him up. Maybelle would tell Daddy, so it wouldn't look as though he, Jess, was a bragger. Maybe Dad would be so proud that he'd forget all about how tired he was from the long drive back and forth to Washington and the digging and hauling all day. He would get right down to the floor and wrestle the way they used to. Old Dad would be surprised at how strong he'd gotten in the last couple years. His body was begging him to quit, but Jess pushed on. He had to let that puny chest of his know who was boss. Jess! It was Maybelle yelling from the other side of the scrap heap. Mama says you gotta come in and eat now. Leave the milk until later. Aw, crud. He'd run too long. Now everyone would know he'd been out and start in on him. Yeah, okay. He turned, still running, and headed for the scrap heap. Without breaking his rhythm, he climbed over the fence, scrambled across the scrap heap, and thumped Maybelle on the head. Ow! And trotted on into the house. Well, look at the big Olympic star, said Ellie, banging 2 cups on the table so the strong black coffee sloshed out, sweating like a knock-kneed mule. Jess pushed his damp hair out of his face and plunked down on the wooden bench. He dumped 2 spoonfuls of sugar into his cup and slurped to keep the hot coffee from scalding his mouth. Ooh, Mama, he stinks. Brenda pinched her nose with her pinky crooked daintily. Make him wash. Get over here to the sink and wash yourself, his mother said without raising her eyes from the stove, and step on it. These grits are scorching in the bottom of the pot already. Mama, not again, Brenda whined. Lord, he was tired, and there was not a muscle in his body that did not ache. You heard what Mama said, Ellie yelled at his back. I can't stand it, Mama, said Brenda again. Make him get his smelly self off of this bench. Jess put his cheek down on the bare wood at the tabletop. Jess-E! His mother was looking now. And put on a shirt. Yes'm. He dragged himself to the sink, and the water he nipped on his face and up his arms pricked like ice. His hot skin crawled under the cold drops. Maybelle was standing in the kitchen door watching him. Give me a shirt, Maybelle. She looked as if her mouth was set to say no, but instead she said, You shouldn't ought to beat me in the head. And she went off obediently to fetch his t-shirt. Good old Maybelle. Joyce Ann would have been screaming just from that little tap. 4-year-olds were a pure pain. I got plenty of chores needs to be doing around here this morning, his mother announced as they were finishing the grits and red gravy. His mother was from Georgia, and she still cooked like it. Oh, Mama, Ellie and Brenda squawked in concert. These girls could get out of work faster than grasshoppers could slip through your fingers. Mama, you promised me and Brenda we could go to Millsburg for school shopping. You ain't got no money for school shopping. Mama, we're just gonna have a look around. Lord, he wished that Brenda would stop whining so. Christmas! You don't want us to have no fun at all. Any fun, Ellie corrected her primly. Oh, shut up. Ellie ignored her. Miss Timmons is coming by to pick us up. I told Lolly on Sunday that you said it was okay. I feel dumb calling her and saying you changed your mind. Oh, all right, but I ain't got no money to give you. Any money, something whispered inside Jess's head. I know, Mama. We'll just take the $5 that Daddy promised us. No more than that. What $5? Oh, Mama, you remember. Ellie's voice was sweeter than a melted Mars bar. Daddy said last week that we girls were going to have something for school. Oh, take it, said his mother angrily, reaching for her cracked vinyl purse on the shelf above the stove, and she counted out 5 wrinkled bills. Mama, Brenda was starting again. Can't we just have one more so it'll be 3 each? No. Mama, you can't buy nothing for $2.50. Just one little pack of notebook papers gone up to... No. Ellie got up noisily and started to clear the table. It's your turn to wash, Brenda, she said loudly. Oh, Ellie! Ellie jabbed her with a spoon. Jessie saw that look. Brenda was shut up her wine halfway out of her rose-luster, lipsticked mouth. She wasn't as smart as Ellie, but even she knew when not to push Mama too far, which left Jess to do the work as usual. Mama never sent the babies out to help, although if he worked it, he could usually get Maybelle to do something. He put his head down on the table. The run-in had done him in this morning. Through his top ear came the sound of the Timmins' old Buick. "Wants oil," his daddy would say, and the happy buzz of voices outside the screen door as Ellie and Brenda squished in among the 7 Timmonses. "All right, Jessie, get your lazy self off that bench. Miss Bessie's bag is probably dragging ground by now, and you still got beans to pick." Lazy. He was the lazy one. He gave his poor dead weight of a head one more minute on the tabletop. "Jessie?" "Okay, Mama, I'm going." It was Maybelle who came to tell him in the bean patch that people were moving to the old Perkinses' place down on the next farm. Jess wiped his hair out of his eyes and squinted. Sure enough, a U-Haul was parked right by the door. One of those big jointed ones. Those people had a lot of junk, but they wouldn't last. The Perkins place was one of those ratty old country houses that you moved into because you had no decent place to go and moved out of it just about as quickly as you could. He thought later how peculiar it was that it was probably the biggest thing in his life, but he shrugged it off as nothing. The flies were buzzing around his sweating face and shoulders. He dropped the beans into the bucket and swatted with both hands. "Give me my shirt, Maybelle." The flies were more important than any U-Haul. Maybelle jogged to the end of the row and picked up his T-shirt from where it had been discarded earlier. She walked back, holding it with 2 fingers away from way out in front of her. "Ooh, it stinks," she said, just as Brenda would have. "Shut up," he said, and he grabbed the shirt away from her.